Should we be worried about the S&P 500? It's riding very, very high right now, which is fantastic if you're currently holding shares in the S&P 500. But what I believe is what goes up must come down. So the S&P, we know historically it's performed fantastically, and once again it's proving to be that really strong, safe and secure investment for building your wealth through compound interest. I personally am a big fan of index funds and specifically the S&P 500. Having said that, right now the price is very high and it hasn't had a big dip since 2022. So that is leading me on to create a assumption that it may possibly come down. Now, there's evidence for that, which I'm going to get onto right now. So the S&P 500 is a very well diversified fund, but it does stay heavily weighted in one particular sector, and that is the tech sector. And I'm going to use this analogy right now to give you an example of how that tech sector could potentially be a chink in the armor for the S&P 500. So we're going to use the analogy of a farmer. Let's call him Farmer Ben. Now, Farmer Ben has planted all of his fields with a particular crop. He goes to harvest those crops and he's found that they've all perished. So Ben, later on in the next harvest, goes, how am I going to rectify that issue from happening again? He goes, okay, well, I'll diversify my crops. I won't have one single type of crop, I'll have multiple crops. A great idea. So Farmer Ben goes and plants multiple different crops. He's spreading his risk. So if one of them fails, he can fall back on the other. Seems like a pretty bulletproof plan, doesn't it? So Farmer Ben plants his diverse range of crops. He goes to harvest it, and lo and behold, they've all grown lovely. He's very happy. All of his crops have bared fruit and he's ready to harvest them. So Farmer Ben jumps into his tractor. He goes to start it on and the tractor is as dead as a dodo. The tractor doesn't start. What Ben has not equated for is the massive sector of his investment. He has not accounted for the tech sector. His tractor is essentially the tech sector. He's diversified his funds, but because of the heavily weighted tech sector being his tractor not starting, that will have a massive impact on the rest of his crops. So I've probably butchered that analogy right there, but I think you can kind of get where I'm going with this. The S&P 500 is well diversified. You've got multiple different investments in there, just like Farmer's Ben's crop field. He's got different fruits and stuff like that, but his sector is the food sector. And when his tractor doesn't start, well, he can't relinquish any of those particular crops. So Farmer Ben's issue there is the tractor, and that is the same for the S&P 500. The tractor in this scenario is the tech center. Now, some points to prove this fact is 10 of the largest companies in the S&P 500 are 22% of the index, give or take. That's how large the top 10 are. And every pound you put in, 22p of those from that pound goes to the top 10 companies in the S&P 500. 8 out of those 10 are related to the tech sector. So you can kind of see where I'm going with this. Yes, the S&P 500 has 500 different companies in its index fund, but it's massively weighted in the tech center. So, as we know, if there's 8 out of 10 of those, of the top 10 are carrying 22% of the S&P 500, if something was to happen to the tech center, well, what's going to happen to the S&P 500? Should we be worried about the tech center failing? Well, it's difficult to say, isn't it? Right now, I mean, everyone has an electronic device within arm's reach. So you could argue that there's no way the tech sector is going anywhere. Having said that, there's something to bear in mind, and that is AI, artificial intelligence. How will this affect the S&P 500 and tech in general? Well, it's going to have an astronomically big effect, positive or negative. It's yet to be seen. The whole thing of AI is that no one can really predict where it's going to go or where it's going to take the tech sector. So for me, there is a vulnerability there with AI. We've only just got into the realms of it as an industry, as something that we don't even fully understand. So for me, that is creating some form of uncertainty for the tech sector. Now, how will this affect the S&P? No one really knows. But if we look at the history of the S&P 500 and how companies will come and go throughout time, we can build up a bit of an idea of what the future may hold. Now, from 1955, only 52 companies remain since then in the S&P 500. From 1955, only 52 companies remain. I mean, that's a pretty low figure. And I think that goes to show the sort of volatility with companies. And I think that's only getting more regular, and companies are becoming more at risk as the tech sector and human nature as an investment sector and as a global community, we evolve so fast. Now, the S&P 500, the companies on the list, when we look at how long they've spent on the list, when we look at 1965, the S&P 500, the average company was on there for 33 years. We move down to 1990, the average company survives on the S&P 500 for 20 years. We move to a prediction of 2026, and it's looking like the average company will only spend 14 years on the S&P 500. So that's going to show the volatility historically and throughout time moving forward. And when you have to bring in things like AI and central banks, digital currencies, CBDCs, all of these different things are going to massively affect index funds and funds specifically like the S&P 500. So in a final conclusion, is it safe? Is it a secure investment? Or is it something that you should be wary of maybe going forward into the future? For me, right now, it's a sure thing. I love the S&P 500. I think it's giving me great yields on my investment. I'm making more than 10 to 15% on my investments through compound interest with very low fees, while also not paying any tax. So it's a great way for me of building compound interest, but it is something I'm going to be monitoring closely going forward, especially for me, the AI, artificial intelligence sector. I really just feel like that's something to have a careful eye on. I don't know if it would ever detrimentally affect the S&P and other index funds to a point of no return. I think they're too well diversified, and hopefully the other areas of the S&P and other index funds like the All World Index Fund will keep it propped up if the tech sector does fail. But it leaves the question, doesn't it? If we're heavily weighted in the tech sector, if something was to happen to it, something therefore is going to happen to the S&P 500. So I'm just sort of erring the side of caution here, and remembering the fact that it's important not to get too much tunnel vision with your investments. It's easy to get that when you're getting the yields and the returns you want. It's easy to forget about the possibilities of negatives occurring. So I'm just trying to keep my eyes open going forward in the future. I do think there's an element of risk there with, the future of the tech sector being the backbone of the S&P 500. But for now, I think it's a great way to build compound wealth and, to build wealth without paying tax. And there's some real great benefits there, but definitely something to keep an eye on for the future. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Thank you very much for watching. I love talking about index funds and specifically the S&P 500. If you've enjoyed this one, let me know in the comment section below. And I look forward to seeing you all in the very next episode. Well, thank you for staying till the very end of the episode. I really appreciate your valuable time. For that, I just wanted to let you know about my channel membership here on YouTube. You can join the exclusive club by becoming a premium future investor. We've got a fantastic amount of people and club members in our exclusive club as of now, and I must say it's great fun. Not only do you get priority reply to all of your comments on YouTube, but you also get exclusive behind the scenes content. Most recently, I did a full investment portfolio reveal. That's right, I included everything from my precious metals, my cash savings, my property, and my index funds. So if you are wanting to see exclusive behind the scenes, joining that club is possibly a great venture for you. Not only that though, but you do also get automatic entry every single month into fantastic gold and silver and precious metal prize giveaways. So for your chance to be entered, join the exclusive club and come and say hello. It's a fantastic place to be, and I really hope to see you there.